Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Here. Meanwhile Here on Earth is the show, and I've been really looking forward to this one. My guest tonight is an old friend, and I'm going to give you a partial biography, which is longer than most biographies, to set the stage and then begin to chat. Filmmaker and artist Paul Davids is filmmaker, artist, and author. Paul Davids is from Bethesda, Maryland, and has a BA in psychology from Princeton University. He was one of the first fellowship students at the American Film Institute Center for Advanced Film Studies. Paul has been produced.
Matter of fact, the dean of the Center for Advanced Film Studies, when I applied there a few years later, Frank Daniel, loved the story too. It doesn't lend itself to cinema very much that I can think of. Maybe I'll think of it one day, but I think you and I mainly originally met through the UFO interest.
We did. And as I mentioned to you beforehand, I've lost count of how many people have shared with me their UFO accounts, sightings, contact experiences. Yours has loomed in the top 10 ever since you told me many years ago, and we'll get to that later. But I would say it was this dramatic transition of going from being a skeptic to believer isn't the right word. No more than we believe we're sitting in the chairs we're sitting in.
Proselytizer.
But I'd like to start earlier than that, with some memories of your early childhood and your parents. Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure. I had a really, really exceptional father. Dr. Jules Davids was one of the founders of Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service. And among his respected students were Jackie Kennedy, wife of then Senator Kennedy, who then became president. And she enlisted him to work with her husband on all the historical research for Profiles in Courage.
Yeah.
Writing drafts to help in the preparation for writing the book. And another of his students later became President Bill Clinton. That was my dad. He was above all a scholar. Now, he was not a businessman. This was maybe unfortunate for me because he didn't have any sense of business, but he didn't have to because he was a university professor. You know. But my father, when somebody gave him an assignment and he'd say, well, how much do you think I should be paid for it? He wouldn't really, he was not assertive about money at all. But my dad was brilliant and he knew just everything about American history. And then along the way, he was enlisted by scholarly resources to write what they called the China Papers. This was a 50-volume set, big volumes of all the diplomatic papers between the United States and China, starting from the time that the United States first acknowledged that there was a China. And he put all of the diplomatic papers together. When my father was on a project like that, he was buried, in it for the longest time. He was also enlisted to write a biography of New York Governor Averell Harriman, who was Secretary of State, very, very important advisor to Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that book wasn't published. And my father became ill with Alzheimer's when he was in his, I would say it was his mid to late 60s. And he had a decline that was just terrible for the whole family. It just was very, very tragic and had a profound effect on me. But you can see I was a great admirer and fan of my father. My mother was a 5th grade school teacher. She loved me and my sister very much, as did my dad. And she took note of my early artistic talent. And she enrolled me in private art classes when I was still in elementary school.
Oh, wonderful.
She was taking me every Saturday, to learn about pencil drawing and charcoal drawing and perspective and oil paints and how to prepare a palette and a color wheel, and then how to paint an oil painting. And this is what I was doing in I think 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade. But a lot of that was my mother's doing. My mother and I did not have a completely tranquil relationship. She did not approve of a lot of the directions I went off in. They were both materialist agnostics. They weren't religious. So they didn't deny God. They didn't believe in God. We are ethnically Ashkenazi Jews, but I was not bar mitzvahed, and they did not practice Judaism. Let me turn off the phone that's in the background. So they were skeptics, and I was raised to be a skeptic in just about everything. Mm-hmm. The paranormal, ESP, UFOs. It was all, no, doesn't exist. Nice fantasy. So when my life took a turn toward not only understanding that UFOs were real, but feeling that it was a mission on my part to let the world know that. And I did that through a movie that became quite a classic.
Yes.
That's Roswell, also known as Roswell, the UFO Coverup. From Showtime. My mother and I kind of parted ways there. She watched the film and she was loving it up until the point that we showed that there was an alien recovered at Roswell. And she said, "Oh my God, Paul, you've just ruined the movie for me." I mean, you see, this is just something that absolutely didn't exist for her and couldn't be real.
Right. And
I spent many wasted years trying to make her understand, that it was real. So eventually, I gave up. But, my mother is a very dear person, very well educated, and supported me in so many ways. So those are my parents.
Paul, with two such memorable parents, strong, focused people, you still had a real kid childhood. We grew up in a more innocent time, and mainstays for creative nerds were things like Mad Magazine, Cracked, and of course, Famous Monsters. Which
let's start with Mad Magazine.
Let's do it.
Because I was a devotee of Mad Magazine.
You and I both. One of the reasons we became the people we are.
It was like issue number 30 was the first one, and then I was obsessed to go back and collect all the early issues. And right. Some of them were almost impossible to acquire and expensive in those days.
Whoa.
Of course, the expensive prices those days are nothing compared to what they're worth today.
Oh my God. Yeah, don't even start.
But I had grandparents who lived in New York, and in one trip to New York, my father, at my request, took me to the Mad Magazine offices. And I met Al Feldstein, the editor of Mad. I took pictures. I later sent him the photos, and he actually signed the photos and mailed them back to me. And that was one of the high points of my childhood, seeing the offices of Mad. And in those days, I think when I look to the future, and I'm talking about when I was in like 5th to 6th grade.
Yeah.
I saw working for Mad Magazine as one option. And the other option would have been going to Hollywood and making monster movies. Okay. I was obsessed with monster movies as a kid. I mean, so many kids are, but this is before the monsters of today. Any movie you look at, they have fantastic monsters. They're so incredible and realistic. I mean, you can start with Jurassic Park and go on from there.
Oh, sure.
The Planet of the Apes and, all of them. But in those days, you have to understand, it was the 1950s, and it was the days of the cheapy, exploitational science fiction or horror double features.
You bet.
They would have a double feature, a new one every Saturday that they would promote with ads in the newspapers. Well, as a kid, of course, I'm hypnotized by those ads. Every ad I see, the crawling eye, or the invasion of the body snatchers, or invasion of the saucer men, or
them,
the flying saucers, them. All of these movies, the titles had magic.
Yes,
the ads were hypnotizing, and I wanted to see them all.
Were you able to?
Here was the problem. My mother was sternly opposed to this whole interest on my part.
Oh, we had very different mothers in that respect.
Yeah. So, I mean, she encouraged the wholesome things, art, but she forbid me from seeing all the movies I wanted to see. Well, fortunately, I had a wonderful best friend, Jeff Tinsley, and his father, Max Tinsley, didn't mind at all taking Jeff and me to see the double features on Saturday afternoons.
And keeping the secret from your mother?
I think in those days I didn't advertise what we were going to see. Or I may have told a lie about what we had gone to see. But I still didn't get to see all of the ones I saw. I mean, I didn't see King Kong until later. And there was an incident, I think I was in 9th grade, when I defied my mother and said, I'm going to see this triple feature they're having at the Bethesda Theater. They're having The Horror of Dracula, The Curse of Frankenstein, and Monster on the Campus, triple feature.
Whoa.
And I let it be known that I was going to go with some friends. And my mother was so incensed, she sent my father into the theater to yank me out of the theater right at the beginning of The Horror of Dracula. So this shows you what I was up against as a future monster filmmaker of America.
You could have become a serial killer. I mean,
it was
goodness, things worked out.
And when Forrest J. Ackerman's famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, with publisher James Warren, who I so much respect, and by the way, I just got his annual Christmas card today. Thank you, Jim Warren. Famous monsters, from issue number 1. Jeff was allowed to own them. I wasn't. A couple years later, I was allowed to own Playboy. My parents said, sex is a natural thing. You can look at pictures of naked girls. We just don't want
monsters are a natural thing too.
No, not so natural. So, Jeff would sneak over to my house to look at Playboy, and I would sneak over to his house to look at famous monsters, and we reveled in that. And we studied the great producers and special effects people who were put forward in that magazine, who became our heroes, bar none.
Is it Jeff that you began making movies with?
Yes.
How did you get your first movie camera? Please tell us about your first.
To begin, I wanted to make science fiction and monster movies with my friends, but I had to use a different pretext. And I sold my father on the fact that, I would be doing family movies, and this would have a great archival purpose for the family. And my father, when he was with me in that camera store, And camera store is very meaningful for me, by the way, because that was my first profession, working in camera stores, camera repair facility, even all the way to Paris, selling cameras in a department store and speaking French later. But so here is my father. He's looking at the price of the camera, and then he's realizing, okay, but we got to buy a screen. And what else do we need? And then there's going to be the cost of film. That's going to be a recurring cost. So he's thinking about it. And I don't think I was able to push him over the edge that first time, but maybe with help from my mother, he said yes. And within a week or two, I had a Keystone triple turret 8mm camera. And of course, I took the family pictures, and then I went out to make monster movies with my friend Jeff Tinsley, my friend Bill Goodwin, Rob Wank, the kids of the neighborhood who were all into famous monsters. We built monsters with help from Jeff's dad, Max Tinsley. We built a robot that one of us could get inside of, and like this, it was metal, made out of corrugated aluminum. And I'm telling you, the still photography of monsters started in 5th grade. 6th grade was the movies, and 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, apart from schoolwork and playing the clarinet in band, it was almost all about making science fiction and monster movies with my friends. Wow. We probably made 50. Usually they're one reel, which is about 3 minutes long, and they're silent because we did not have video. We didn't have any sound. Yeah. So they were little silent films. And sometimes it would be Jeff dressing up as the monster, and I'm the director. Sometimes we would have a little mannequin we would create that we would make look huge. We would sometimes do a Gulliver's Travels kind of movie, and these movies began to capture attention in the Washington area. First from the Washington Society of Cinematographers, and then from Teen Magazine. It was a page in the Washington Evening Star newspaper. Washington had 2 big newspapers at that time. It had Washington Post, Evening Star. And Evening Star every Friday devoted a page called Teen, what the local teens were doing. So one Friday they devoted an entire page to my movies called Making Monsters Grow, which had a lot of pictures of me and my friends and the story of our making the monster movies. This was a huge, huge deal. I think maybe we were can't remember whether it was 8th or 9th grade, when it came out. But at that point is a key transitional event in my life, and that is meeting Forrest J. Ackerman. Do you want to tell them a little about him? And then
I want to hold that for a moment and first go to a still that I absolutely adore.
Yeah. That's me as Gulliver, picking up my friend Ron Wank. And
talk about your special effects.
It's a perspective distortion. You see, the Lilliputian Rob Wank is about 20, 25 feet down the road. I've just lined up my hand perfectly to look like I'm holding him. Well,
and then I love this.
Yes, this is Glarf. This was a sea serpent that I built, and the tower in the background is from rear screen projection. The model in the front is the Union Ice Company. It's an HO model building, and we made a movie with Glarf and with the meeting of Forrest J. Ackerman, everything opened to another level.
It looks pretty bad for the people in the car.
Yeah.
There you go.
This is the dragon from a film we made that we entered into the famous Monsters of Filmland first amateur movie contest.
Whoa.
There was a script that was written by Forrest J. Ackerman called Siegfried Saves Metropolis. It had a dragon in it. That was the dragon I made. This was a 6th grade photograph we made. Yeah, they were going back to the dragon. And here we have the Tyrannosaurus. We have a fellow named Grant Bishop throwing a spear at it. That Tyrannosaurus is actually a wax figure you could buy for around $1. It's real close to the camera, sitting on a table you can't see.
He's looking good.
We used every trick we could think of. Of course, this is way before any opportunity to use modern special effects. But one thing about Monster, that's Man Beast. One thing about the Monster magazines is they generally didn't reveal the secrets.
Yes.
Now here we have the cover of Famous Monsters number 35 that announced the winners of the Siegfried Says Metropolis Amateur Movie Contest.
Whoa. And
Jeff and I, our film was chosen as one of the winners. That was one that did an article about the movies we were making as children after the teen magazine came out. And this all happened because we met Forrest J. Ackerman at the
Let's talk about here how you met him.
Yeah.
You won a contest that changed your life.
Yeah. Well, that happened after I met Fari, of course. Jeff's father read in the newspaper that there was a World Science Fiction Convention going on in downtown Washington. And that Forrest J. Ackerman and his publisher James Warren were going to be at the Statler Hilton for the convention. And Jeff's father said to Jeff's mother, Edith, I've just got to get the boys down there to meet these men. And he took the initiative. And he drove Jeff and me down, and we brought stills from our movies. I think we brought the teen article. And there was Forrest J. Ackerman, our hero, the editor of Famous Monsters, national magazine, looking at the article about our movies, saying, boys, this is wonderful. You know, you've got to send us photos from your movie. We have to print this in Famous Monsters. This, to me, was like, hearing I'm getting a starring role in a Hollywood movie. I mean, this was just, I was ecstatic. So imagine I'm in 9th grade. And I met James Warren, who, like Fari, became a friend for life. James Warren was the businessman who first came up with the whole concept of Famous Monsters, and he hired Forrest J. Ackerman, who was a profound collector.
Yes,
Hollywood memorabilia of science fiction. He had a house. Fari had a house. We called him Fari. Called the Acker Mansion. And every room in the mansion, much to the dismay of Fari's wife, was filled with monster props and memorabilia from the various monster movies, and posters everywhere, and art from the movies, and the mannequins, and all of the things that went into behind the scenes. And he had file cabinets with thousands of lobby cards. And because he told about this in Famous Monsters, every kid in America who was a monster fan, their biggest dream, more so than getting to go to Disneyland,
visit his home.
Getting to visit Fari in his home.
Which you did.
Oh, eventually, Fari became a friend for life. Even after life, even after death. That's a whole other story.
Yes, it is. We'll get to it.
But the thing is, yes, so winning that contest, all right. But, I'm a scholar's son. My parents expect me to either become an MD, get a law degree, or have a PhD and be a scholar and college professor like my father. I mean, this was kind of expected for my niche. And I was very pushed into academia. I was a very, very good student and loved English, got very high grades in Walter Johnson High School, where I went. Mrs. Jessie Snowden, the only Black teacher there that I remember, who was my high school senior English teacher, who was just brilliant. I just adored her. She really helped set me on a path of devotion to, to literature.
Yeah.
But I had to apply to college. My father really wanted me to go to an Ivy League school. And it turned out I was accepted at both Yale and Princeton. And I do think the fact that I made these childhood monster movies helped me get in, because we had an interview with an alumnus, and the alumnus thinks, wow, this is different. This kid has got something maybe other kids don't have.
How interesting.
And I had high grades. So between Yale and Princeton, I chose Princeton. Yale's a great school. I didn't really want to spend 4 years of my life living in New Haven. Princeton is one of the most beautiful communities in the country, one of the most beautiful colleges. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Goes back to King's Charter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot like Cambridge in its appearance.
Yes.
So I went to Princeton, and 4 years of my life were just completely ensconced in, life at Princeton and succeeding in scholarship. I majored in psychology, and I'll tell you, it was during the Vietnam War. I wasn't very eager about being conscripted to be a soldier. Very few of us were.
Yeah.
My hat's off to, the patriots who devoted themselves to that, and America's calling at that time. Okay. I knew that if I went to medical school, I'd have an additional 4-year deferment. Maybe the war would be over by then.
Right.
So I prepared pre-med, took all the pre-med courses, physics, biology, and chemistry and organic chemistry, which is a very challenging, difficult course. So there I am. And while at Princeton, I have the opportunity one summer to go abroad to France, the summer work abroad program. They sent me to Paris. My French was pretty good at that time. I had also had a lot of practice visiting Quebec. I had a girlfriend in Quebec who didn't speak English, so I was qualified, except I had a Canadian accent. But here's the thing. They got me a job working in the Au Printemps department store in Paris for the summer. And what a wonderful, I have painted so many paintings of Paris, as a result of my love of that city.
Yes.
And my love of all the French painters.
Yeah.
But that summer I worked in the camera department there, selling cameras. And one weekend, I with a friend, I went to London, and I found out it was the premiere happening there of The Yellow Submarine.
Oh, gosh.
And I did love the Beatles. And I went to the premiere of The Yellow Submarine. I may have been the only person in the audience that stood up to give it an absolutely raving, top of my lungs, standing ovation. And I sat through it a second time. And by the next morning, this was the first epiphany in my life. My life had changed. I just knew I was not destined to be a doctor. I couldn't go to medical school. I had to pursue my interest in cinema.
Yeah.
I was saying to myself then, look, I don't care if I end up being a colorist, coloring one frame in the next Yellow Submarine. I'd rather do that. And when I announced to my family, I think I was already accepted for University of Pennsylvania medical school. I'd taken the medical boards and all that stuff. And when I was accepted and broke the news to my parents in a phone call from Paris, my parents were so shocked. You could have picked them both up off the floor, so especially my mother. The next day, she was on the phone to my aunt saying, "My God, you won't believe it. Paul is throwing his life away." That was her assessment of the fact that I was going to take a path that wasn't a tried and true path. But My father came around in a very valiant way. By the time I'd come back from Paris, he had done research, and he said, Paul, look, if you apply to the USC School of Cinema on this program promising that you'll teach cinema after you get a master's degree, you could get a $1,500 scholarship. Okay. So I applied and I got the scholarship. And then my dad is reading in the paper and he says, you know what? The American Film Institute in Los Angeles, actually in Beverly Hills, they are starting a new school called the Center for Advanced Film Studies.
Gosh.
Says, you know, I guess your chances of getting in would be almost none. Says they're taking fewer than 20 students from around the world. They're giving all of them a full fellowship. None of them is going to have to pay a dime.
Yeah.
But he said, you probably won't get in there.
Go for it.
Possibility with USC, or would UCLA be a better film school? He said, what I think you should do, Paul, is call up the American Film Institute in Los Angeles and ask for their advice whether it's better for you to go to UCLA or USC. So I get on the phone with this brilliant man, this absolutely adoring, wonderful man named Richard Collenberg, who had worked for the government in the American film program with George Stevens Jr.
Oh, gosh.
Son of the great George Stevens.
Yeah, one of America's greatest directors.
Yeah, I directed multiple films with Elizabeth Taylor. So I'm on the phone with Richard Collenberg to ask him, should I go? My dad thought I should ask you, should I go to USC or UCLA? And Richard Collenberg said, well, why should you go to one of them? Why don't you apply to us? I told him about myself and my childhood movies, and I'd done animated cartoons, and I said, they wanted to know what my thesis would be on for a master's, and I've written up this proposal. The problem in movies today is that in traveling mats, the blue screen, the matchup, when you put a character in a scene, he's not really there, you can see a black line around the character. You can always tell it's a fake shot. I said, I want to be the guy that invents a system that's better than that. Let's get rid of the traveling mat. And Richard Collenberg says, yeah, this may be the place for you to be. we could set you up with the right people. Apply to us. So I applied. And I sent them my movies. I sent them my writings from Princeton, including The Death of Sidney Pip.
Good.
And then I get a call from George Stevens Jr.'s office in Washington, D.C. that George Stevens Jr. is interviewing all the finalists.
Whoa.
And he wants to schedule an interview with me. So I go down to Washington to talk to the great George Stevens Jr., who is the president of the American Film Institute.
Yeah.
And his concern was that I was just graduating Princeton. Most of the candidates they were taking, some of them already had advanced degrees. One of them had been a professional photographer for 10 years. Some of them already had the beginnings of a profession.
Yeah.
Here I am. I would be one of the youngest just coming out of undergraduate school. And George is asking himself, saying, you're really qualified, Paul, but, maybe it would be better for you to reapply, in another year. I think about this. And then we got to talking about Kennedy. And I mentioned the fact that, my father had worked for Kennedy in the work of writing of Profiles in Courage, all the purpose of the work.
Yeah. And
George Stevens Jr., his eyebrows, he really went up on that. And I think that Sorensen, advisor to Kennedy, was one of the people that may have been personally advising George Stevens Jr. looking at some of the files for the candidates.
How interesting.
So somehow or other, it was the most important moment in my life at that point. I get the notification that I will be one of the first 18 students, complete fellowship, American Film Institute, and they're going to put up the budget for my first sound film.
Wow.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
What a moment. What a moment.
Mm. So when you ask the question about, Paul, how did you become the person that you ended up to be? Well,
this is
I had some breaks. Those were the early breaks.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't have breaks all along the way, mind you. I had some downtimes. I had setbacks, after the Center for Advanced Film Study. But while I was there at the center, first of all, I got really close with Forrest J. Ackerman, visited his mansion dozens of times. And I got very close with the great producer who I admired so much, George Powell.
Oh, gosh.
I met George Powell. He was the producer of films such as The War of the Worlds, the original, The Time Machine. He did Tom Thumb, The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm, Destination Moon.
Great movie.
He did about 16 films, and many of them were among my all-time favorites. And I called his office. This is how it happened. I spoke to his assistant, Gay Griffith, and I said who I was. I was at the AFI, and I was so interested in George's work, and I had done a student film. Is there any chance that George might possibly see it? And a date was set up for George to come to the American Film Institute and watch the projection of my 16 millimeter student film that I made there called Examination. Sitting right next to me in the theater, in the screening room, is George Powell, one of the greatest heroes of my youth.
And a great a master of early special effects. Yes.
The other thing that was happening was that Forrest J. Ackerman was a very close friend of the great master,
Ray Harryhausen.
Yes, and George Powell was Ray Harryhausen's first employer on his Puppetoons. But Fari was then instrumental in my forming a relationship with the great Ray Harryhausen. So, this kind of describes the AFI. I know I'm leaving out some important things that'll come to me, but my film was based on a fantasy story I had written at Princeton, which had won the Tiger Magazine Humorous Writing Award. And I don't know, I think it still holds up today. It has kind of a good message.
I want to backtrack a bit. And this is what a feeling this must have been to see your output in Famous Monsters magazine. Holy shit.
Yeah, this came about in the months after I met Fari Ackerman at the Statler Hilton in Washington. And this is me with Fari later. This is actually, I'm showing Fari a script I wrote for the Transformers cartoons. One of my biggest breaks was when I was hired at Marvel Productions to be actually the production coordinator for all of the Transformers cartoons. I mean, I came in at about cartoon number 7 or 8, and then I was aboard for 79 episodes.
Oof.
As coordinator of the production. It was really intense. And the story editors at Marvel came to appreciate my writing ability. Stan Lee was there at that time too.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't involved in the Transformers directly, but I did know him then. And the story editors let me start writing scripts for the Transformers. So I wrote 4 of the shows in addition to all of that. And that was me with Fari in the heyday of my Transformers days.
And a few more pictures from Famous Monsters.
Yeah. So in the middle there, that's with a slightly blondish hair is me. And off to the right is my best friend from childhood, Jeff Tinsley.
Yeah.
We were inseparable. We were always planning our next monster movie. And he was always the star, and he was a good star. He was talented. He was a good swashbuckler. And to my great despair, Jeff died in 2017 of a brain tumor.
Oh.
We maintained our lifelong close friendship. And whereas I went into film, Jeff became maybe the top photographer at the Smithsonian Museum of American History.
Wow.
Jeff was the one they sent onto the dais every 4 years at the presidential inauguration to take the Smithsonian's pictures of the new president. And he did that again and again and again. He was there, I think, 30 years at the Smithsonian. And boy, you know, the world never had two such close buds as Jeff and I from childhood. But college, you know, we sort of went our separate ways. And he was in the Navy for a while. And he was also very much into car photography, racing car photography. And his pictures were always published in the racing car magazine. So that was an interest he had, which wasn't so much in my direction. But I do want you to know that the two of us got our education in photography side by side, starting in 5th grade, because down the street from me was a brilliant physicist, photographic physicist named Calvin MacLachlan. And he took Jeff and me in once a week, I think it was on a Tuesday, to teach us everything about photography he could. So we learned everything about depth of field and, you know, f-stops and contrast and different types of black and white film and how to process your black and white film, darkroom techniques. He taught us the chemistry of actually making our own film on glass plates.
Wow.
And putting it in a pinhole camera that we made in a shoebox. And this was Jeff and me side by side as kids, learning so much about the things that would become so important to us both in our future. Thanks to Calvin MacLachlan.
Wonderful.
Now that, of course, is in Famous Monsters. That was a picture from our Siegfried Saves Metropolis movie. That was and I'm a magician.
Yeah, now let's talk about that for a moment. You are a magician, and how did that start?
I am a world-class magician.
You are.
I hate to toot my horn to that extent, but I've really become something through the years. It started when I was in, I think, junior high school. I met a friend who had a brother who knew a bunch of magic tricks and started to teach them to me. I started showing them to friends. And then when I was in high school, I spent a summer at the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music with my friend who also played clarinet, Rick Deutsch. And Rick Deutsch and I had created a mental telepathy act where Rick Deutsch could be on stage and I'm on stage and somebody hands me a bill, a dollar bill they take out of their wallet at random. And I'm looking at the bill and telling Rick to concentrate, and Rick is rattling off the serial number of the bill and gets it right. And no one could figure out, how are these guys doing this? Well, you know, we had developed a really elaborate, subtle code. And I'm tipping him off. You know, when I say, you know, concentrate, that means number 1. Do you have it? Well, do rhymes with 2. That's 2. Try. well, try, TRI means 3. So I said, you don't have it yet, Rick? Come on, try. I just said try twice, so that means 3. And he would get the whole code that way. No one was realizing what we were doing, but there was one professional magician sitting in the audience. Marilyn, the magician. He comes up to me afterwards and he gives me his card. He says, "Hi, I'm Marilyn. I know a thing or two about magic. I think you want to call me." I visited Marilyn on a Saturday, and he opened up the world of professional magic to me. He showed me things that nobody gets to see, accepting the fact that I could be a future magician. Well, this is high school. Let's go a few decades later. I'm working on the Transformers show in Hollywood, and one of the writers is a member of the Magic Castle in Hollywood.
Yes.
It's the Academy of Magical Arts. We have a Victorian clubhouse up on a hill in Hollywood, a magnificent building filled with theaters for magicians and a dining hall. And my friend gets me to be able to do an audition to see if I could become a member of the Magic Castle. I passed the audition, I think in 1985 or 6, and I've been a member of the Magic Castle ever since. And all the decades I lived in Hollywood, I would go to the Magic Castle once a week, and I would learn. I would see so many things that puzzled me completely. I didn't have a clue. But gradually over time, some of the magicians would open up to me. I would buy effects, props at their swap meet. And I developed a repertoire. And I specialize in mentalism, mind reading.
I want you, that's a perfect thing. I want you to hold that thought. Mentalism, perfect moment. We are at our break. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Peter Robbins with my special guest tonight, Paul Davids. See you in 5.
The UNX Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Kathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the UNX Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com. The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from UNX Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unxmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unxmedia.com or amazon.com.
And we are back with the second hour of Meanwhile Here on Earth on KUNX Digital Broadcasting. My special guest this evening, Paul Davids. Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you, Peter.
Now, some years ago, I had a wonderful visit to you and your wife, Hollace. At the time, you were living in a beautifully restored craftsman-style house in the Valley in Los Angeles.
Wasn't the Valley. It was near Pasadena.
Near Pasadena. And it's the location you were living in when you had a dramatic change of opinion about the UFO phenomena. I think it's fair to say that, like me, you grew up with the implied understanding from the adult world that flying saucers and UFOs were real in those movies that you were not allowed to see on Saturdays. But otherwise, no. And we had other interests. Again, this is jumping ahead a few years. You're a father and you're at home. And can you describe your general attitude or your any thoughts you had ever given to this phenomenon? And you certainly have an open mind. Up until that particular afternoon when you heard your daughter calling you to come upstairs in a voice that would make a father move very quickly. What was your attitude up until then about the UFO phenomena, flying saucers, etc.?
Up until my then 9-year-old daughter screamed out, "Daddy, get upstairs right now. I see a flying saucer."
Yes, up until then.
So, yeah, I was a skeptic. I had no reason to believe that they existed. Now, I was a writer doing some screenplay rewrites and was a member of the Writers Guild. And there were friends of mine who were doing a documentary about Billy Meyer, the Swiss contactee who has taken hundreds of photos of flying saucers, clear as daylight. And at that time, they were published in a book. I think the company was Genesis, and it was the most profound illustration of UFO photographs anyone had ever published anywhere. The question was, could you believe them?
Right. Some of them are certainly questionable.
So my friend said they needed a narration written for their movie about Billy Meyer. Was I interested? And I said, well, let me think about it. I'd like to talk to some of my friends and see if they think I should get involved in this project, if they think that, that it's real enough that there's merit to it. And I had some special effects buddies there then. And I thought, the pictures looked too good to be true. And I gave the book to one of my special effects buddies who said, look, Paul, here's how you know that this is a fake. He said, you look at such and such a page and you see the saucer hovering over a snowy mountainside. Now, he said, the underside of the craft is completely dark, completely black. What a good special effects man would have done was thrown some light up onto the bottom side of the craft that would be ambient light from the snow.
Sure.
He said, so Paul, I wouldn't get involved in this. So I turned it down. Okay, that had happened sometime 6 months or so before. Okay. But then the November of 1986, there was a key UFO incident that caught the imagination of the world. Japan Airlines flight, I think 1647, near Anchorage, Alaska.
That's right.
And it became a famous case reported in Time magazine because the pilot of that flight, Captain Terauchi of Japan, claimed that he saw a cube-shaped mothership with lots of flying saucers coming and going from the mothership in his flight path.
He made that public, And
he reported it, while the flight was still going on. And from the ground, where they said, do we have anything on radar? Well, they weren't announcing what their radar was showing, obviously. And when this became publicized, somehow in Alaska, I don't know whether it was the FAA or who it was, decided, you know what, we're going to let people buy for 150 or 200 bucks the interview with Captain Tarouchi, his first mate, the question, so they can hear for themselves on an audio cassette what this thing is about. I ordered the cassette, and I was very impressed. At that point, I thought, whoa, this sounds like this could be real, but people are debunking it. There's this man named Philip Glass who says he's sure that the pilot was seeing the planet Jupiter.
Also, I want to just jump in for a moment and say this was not a commercial flight with passengers. It was a cargo flight, and it was a flight of the cargo was wine. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yes. And of course, they used that to ridicule the whole thing.
Terrible.
As if everybody flying the plane had been drunk on wine. But it did make me think. That was November of 86.
Okay.
And at that point, my work on the Transformers show was winding to an end. And I was working at home soon after that, I think starting December, writing a script I had always wanted to write for a long time called Starry Night, about a fantasy about Van Gogh. Van Gogh was a failure in his life. What if he had the opportunity to come back today and see he was actually one of the greatest successes of all time?
It's a wonderful.
I wanted to do it as a movie. Yeah. So I'm writing the script. And my kids at that time were in private school in Pasadena, the Polytechnic School. So my daughter and son are home from school. She's 9 and he's 6. And she's upstairs in her bedroom and I guess doing some homework or something. And I'm writing on the ground floor. Now, let me just say for a moment that morning, very rare snowstorm for that time of year. Well, not that time of year, it was February. But a snowstorm up on Mount Wilson, which you could see from our house in Highland Park. We're up on a hill. And I had my 35 millimeter camera, and I had used up every shot on the roll of film, filming the snow up on Mount Wilson. So that afternoon, I'm typing away, and my daughter Jordan calls me from the upstairs. Like I said, she screamed at the top of her lungs, "Daddy, get upstairs right now. I see a flying saucer." And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, she's interrupted me twice already this afternoon. I'm trying to write. I shout up to her, "Jordan, come on, it's probably a Goodyear blimp. You know what that looks like? Can you look at it again?" "It's not a blimp, Daddy. It's a flying saucer. Get up here right now." Okay, I'd never heard anything so forceful from her in her life. 9 years old. I run up the stairs, and my 6-year-old son and I collide going into her bedroom, which looks out on our roof. And she points, and there's a flying saucer.
Talk about it and how close.
Well, at the beginning, it was probably, it could have been maybe 1,500 feet or more. And it looked like it was descending from a dramatic cloud. And I opened her window, and all three of us walked out on the roof so that we could see better.
It's important to note that the craftsman-style houses, the angle of the roof is very gradual. It's not a pitched. So you can step out on it.
You could walk out on this roof. And as we were out there, this flying saucer, which you could see as clear as a truck on the street, it was a classic dome disc, is descending closer to us and closer. And it reaches a point where it's about, it's either above the road in front of our house, or it's the neighbor's house across the street above the roof, maybe a couple 100 feet. It's really clear. And the damn thing looks exactly like what Billy Meyer called the scout craft of, the pictures I had looked at when I turned it down, and I'm watching it for a while, and the kids are watching it. And I noticed that when it was in a stationary part of the sky, that it had a little wobble to it like this. And when it went horizontally, the wobble stopped. And it did go horizontal to where, see, there's a tree to our left, and there's these branches of the tree have an opening. And the saucer goes right behind the opening of the branches of the tree. So it's still making eye contact with us, which lets me know it's aware of us. Why else is it parking there? It stops there. And while I'm watching it, the underside of the craft, for a little while, turns absolutely dead black. It is a dull silver color, normally, but as if to show me how wrong I was about that craft in Switzerland, it turns absolutely black as night on the underside. And then it turns silver again on the underside. This is around 4 p.m. And then it slowly flies out over our valley. Now, we're the highest house of a valley of really old houses.
Yeah.
From the 1910s, 1920s.
Yes.
And down in Highland Park, which you can see from our roof, there's a 3-story brick building that used to be a schoolhouse. And at that time, I think had become a low-cost tenement housing. And the saucer seemed to be approaching that building, and then it was gone. It was just gone, which was something I just couldn't accept logically at that moment. I was saying, wait a minute. Did it fly really fast off to the left where there are other trees I wouldn't have seen, and I blinked or something, and that's why I didn't see it, you see? I don't think that was the case now at all. It was just gone. Couldn't see it anymore. And that converted me overnight. I mean, not only was it the Billy Meyer thing with the dark underside, as though it was slapping me on the wrist for disbelieving that, but it was a real flying saucer. It was unlike anything else I'd ever seen. It didn't make any sound. Didn't have any exhaust. And that started me on my research. But first, before that, I wanted to see if we could find any other witnesses.
Ah, smart.
So my son came in the car with me. We started driving around the neighborhood. Well, at that time, it was a heavily Spanish-speaking neighborhood. I didn't know how to say flying saucer in Spanish. I tried to ask some people I came across. They didn't know what I was talking about. So I drive down to the tenement building where I thought anybody at that tenement, they would have been closest to see it.
Yeah.
Or it disappeared. So I look, there's a tall metal fence there around the whole building. And I look, and there's some suspicious looking guys parked there in a car. Looks like maybe it's a drug deal coming down. And then there's a little girl, half naked, comes out at one of the doors, and I see her, and I call out to her from behind the fence, is your daddy there? Is your daddy? I got to talk to your daddy, because I wanted to ask, could he have seen it? And she turns to the door and she says, Daddy, there's a man bothering me out here. You better get your gun.
Jesus.
That was the end of my flying saucer research for that afternoon.
Sounds good. And
But
you
very
will-
soon, I was
we will-
buying every book I possibly could find.
that was my next question. You become obsessed, and we will go back to the Magic Castle, but
Yeah.
is this what led you directly into making the decision to commit yourself to a major part of creating a feature film, and a very singular one as well, Roswell, the movie?
Yes. Now, the idea of a movie didn't start right away. It came about soon enough. What happened over the course of the next, that was February. So up until the summer, I bought every UFO book I could find and I devoured them. We were members of a pool then, and sitting at the pool in the summer, I was reading 2-3 UFO books a day, just speed reading them. And
Yeah.
I found for some reason that my memory of all the names and all the cases and the witnesses, it stuck in my mind. I became a ufologist in those 6 months because I suddenly learned the whole history of this field. I knew nothing
You
about.
did indeed.
And I was so curious. We knew somebody who worked at Jet Propulsion Lab, who worked on the Mars Mariner project. And he came out to my house for me to show him and describe what I had seen.
Mm.
And I said, look, I really want to know, could this have been some experiment from JPL? He says, over your house in this neighborhood? I said, but if it was classified, you couldn't tell me. And he said, it's true. If it was classified, I couldn't tell you, but I'm going to tell you. It wasn't ours. Anything like that. It wasn't us.
Yeah.
We're not the answer. And this was a funny guy because he would say, you can ask me any question about Mars. I'm a Mars man. Don't ask me about the moon. I'm not a moon man.
The world of specialization.
Yeah. So that
What-
was expert number one. And then expert number two, who was critical in my development. My wife happened to know Robert Wise, the great director.
Oh
of
my gosh.
The Day the Earth Stood Still.
And who was the film editor in his 20s on Citizen Kane.
Yes. Yeah, he worked with Orson Welles. And he was the director of The Sound of Music and West Side Story, the
Yeah.
original.
No slacker.
And, Hollace called him up and said I'd had this experience and I knew he had made that movie, and could I come down to his office and talk to him about it?
Too much.
And he said, sure. So I'm in his office in Beverly Hills and I'm telling him the whole thing. And he's saying, well, first off, right off, I want to tell you, there's an actor I know named Roy Thinnis. He played a character called David Vincent in a
Right.
TV series called The Invaders.
Intruders. Yeah, Invaders. Yeah.
And it was about a flying saucer investigator. He was the investigator.
Yep. A
And-
series very much ahead of its time.
And Robert Wise said, he has Roy Thinnis has a personal, strong interest in UFO investigations. I'm going to put you in touch with Roy. That was number one. Number two, he said, I want to tell you, Paul, I believe what you're telling me. And when I was making The Day the Earth Stood Still,
Yeah.
there were secretive types from Washington that came out to our set. And one of them said to me, Mr. Wise, I just want you to know that you don't have any idea how close to the truth your film really is. And he said at that point, he knew he was being told from the government that there had been alien contact. Now, this was 1950 or 51. I think the movie was released in 51. So he became a believer, and he said, but the thing I just can't understand is why they would keep it secret. He never got that. He said, in my movie, the day the Earth stood still, it lands on the lawn near the Washington Monument. Everybody sees, everybody knows it's a national story in an hour. Why would they keep it secret? They shouldn't be doing that. Whatever their reason, it's wrong. It's wrong. And so he put me in touch with Roy Thinnis, who comes out to my house. And I walk him through the whole saucer sighting story. He draws the diagrams. And he says, I'm doing up a report. He says, I want to send it to my friend at the Chicago, the J. Allen Hynek Chicago Center for UFO Studies.
Yeah.
His name is Don Schmidt. I want Don to see this report. I think Don is going to get in touch with you. Well, Don did get in touch with me, and it was within not a long period of time when Don was coming to Los Angeles to investigate the MJ-12 documents. They come to the fore.
Yes.
And so Don comes out to my house. I tell him everything. Don tells me all about his experience working with J. Allen Hynek and all the investigations he's done.
Yes, he was his first assistant.
And he talks about the official non-disclosure, the official disinformation and cover-up of all this information, and what a battle they've always had to get the government to admit anything. And he draws a picture of my sighting, which later appeared on the cover of the International UFO Reporter, I think it was called, put out by the J. Allen Hynek Center.
Yes.
So while Don is there, well, first of all, it was Roy Thinnis had first told me about the Roswell incident. He told me, he said, you've got to, he wanted me to read the investigation of unidentified flying objects,
Hynek's book.
Colonel Ruppelt. And he wanted me to read a book called Clear Intent, which at that time really was the best UFO book I had written in terms of exposing the whole what was going on.
Larry Fawcett
and Greenwood, right?
And Barry Greenwood, two outstanding investigators.
Yeah. And in the 1947, in the book about the report on unidentified flying object, I saw that back in the summer of the saucers, 47, many witnesses had described what I did. That when a saucer was in a lateral position, it was wobbling like this, like it was unstable. Some people then called it the falling leaf effect, where it would tend to go like this, down and like that. I didn't see falling leaf, but I saw wobble. And I felt, well, those people that summer, they saw the same thing I did.
That wobble was very well captured in the great B-movie Earth versus Flying Saucers.
Oh, yeah.
With Ray Harryhausen special effects.
Ray Harryhausen did fantastic effects.
Watching that saucer crash into the Capitol building was a real thrill for me as a boy.
And they did say that that was based on Major Kehoe's book. I think it was called Flying Saucers Are Real.
Yeah.
So what Don did when he came to my house, he revealed to me that he and Kevin Randall, famous UFO investigator,
two of the great Roswell scholars,
and Kevin Randall, of course, was Air Force intelligence.
That's right.
So you might have been skeptical, Air Force intelligence, is he a ringer being put into the investigation? Yeah. But Don certainly didn't think he was a ringer, and they worked together. Don said, we're going to completely reinvestigate the Roswell incident. We're going to go down there many times. He said, we've written a 17-page outline, but we're going to turn it into a book, which we're going to call UFO Crash at Roswell. And I said, have any producers yet offered you option money for your 17-page outline that you're going to turn into a book? He said, no. Well, you know, at that time I was just off the Transformers show, but my wife was a senior VP at, let me remember whether she was senior at that point in time, 87. She might not have been promoted to senior, but she was vice president of Columbia Pictures.
Yeah.
We had a lot of contacts.
Yeah.
And in the business. And I said, I'd like to pay you a little bit of money. Let's make a contract. The contract will say you'll get a lot more money if I can lay this off to a network or a studio.
Yeah.
And they agreed. When their book was published, you know, we had the best chance. I submitted it to a lot of people. It was turned down. A lot. I think I have a shoebox full of rejection letters. And most of them said, Paul, if this was true, I would have heard of it.
Of course, that fabulous human arrogance of I'm connected and this couldn't go on.
Well, as a matter of fact, when I got to know Ray Bradbury very well and sat next to him at a dinner one time, and he slapped my wrist for having produced that false Roswell movie, I said, Mr. Bradbury, you know, how can you say that? Have you investigated it?
No.
I mean, do you know about the witnesses? He said, I don't have to. I know it wasn't true.
Yep.
A
lot of major figures in science fiction.
Said, let me tell you what he said. He said, I don't have to, Paul. He said, because if it happened, they'd have told me. I'm Ray Bradbury. He said that to me. So, yeah. But from the time of the sighting, and particularly after I met Don, and as I studied it all, I did feel like because I had been placed in the position to be a daylight witness, that I had a responsibility to tell the world that all of these debunkers were simply wrong. You know, they may not have been dishonest people or bad people or deceived people, but they simply didn't know the truth. And I knew the truth. So I want to tell you, and I want to tell the world. So I was on a quest. I was confronting debunkers like Philip Klass. I was telling them all, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. Just accept the fact you don't know what you're talking about. And of course they would go, you know, I didn't know what I was up against. I was up against a stone wall.
That's right.
And the project was turned down repeatedly. Finally, I had a breakthrough. I went to a reunion for the former creative director of the American Film Institute, Frank Daniel,
right,
who had helped bring me into the program. It was his birthday. And both Jeremy Kagan, who had been a student when I was there, and I showed up at the birthday party. Well, Jeremy had been a quick success in the film business. I was not. I was a slow study. I had a very interesting slow walk up the chain. But Jeremy had made a number of pictures soon after graduating. The Scott Joplin story he made for HBO was absolutely marvelous movie. The Journey of Natty Gann, and a movie called Heroes. And so he was like a rocket out the gate. And at Frank Daniel's birthday party, I pitched him the story. Roswell, I said, but what really interests me, and here's the angle for the movie. It's the character Jesse Marcel, the one who was sent out to the debris field to pick up all the debris, or not all of it. He didn't pick up. He picked up the first samples. And, he saw it become classified. He was told never to talk about it. He had decided that this was not from this earth. He waited 30 years to state publicly on, what was that television show?
Was it not Larry King?
No.
Not Unsolved Mysteries?
Yes, it was Unsolved Mysteries.
Okay.
They had Jesse Marcel on, and 30 years later, he walked a reporter around the debris field. So this is where it came down. There was so much of it we couldn't believe. It covered an area about 3/4 of a mile.
Yeah.
By maybe a quarter of a mile. And he said it wasn't made on this earth. He was the top intelligence operative of the
Roswell Army Airfield.
Roswell Army Airfield, which was the only base in the 40s that had the atomic bomb and the plane to fly it out.
Only one in the world.
So they didn't have slouches there. They didn't have naive people. They didn't have people there who didn't know what a weather balloon was. And Jesse Marcel was forced into a press conference, kneeling in front of the debris of a lot of weather balloon debris had been placed in front of him, forced to acknowledge that this is what he found at the field. Total lie. He couldn't bear it. And he had to keep the secret for 30 years, mind you. 30 years. So I explained this to Jeremy, and I said, I think our story is told at a movie from the point of view of old Jesse Marcel.
Yes.
Who has lived with this in anguish for 30 years.
Yes.
And I said, if I'm writing a script, I want there to be a reunion of his people from the military base, and we get him back there with the people who've kept the secret for 30 years and let him nose around and try and get to the bottom of it. And Jeremy said, I love this idea. And he was not a particular believer in saucers at the time. He hadn't followed the field. He said, it doesn't matter whether it was actually a saucer or not. It's the human story.
Yes.
What the storm went through. We can do this. So he pitched it to Bob Cooper, who was then head of television movies at HBO.
Right.
Jeremy had made several movies at HBO. So he got HBO to give us a contract. And one of the producers at HBO, her name is Eileen Kahn. Now she's Eileen Kahn Power. She was the most helpful person to getting this movie made of anybody along the way. But at that time, we had a contract, and I had a first draft screenplay, and they said, Paul, we don't want to use it. We don't, you're not the caliber writer we want for this. So they had just made a contract with a famous American playwright, Arthur Coppett. So he said, Jeremy and Paul, we want you two guys to have a meeting with Arthur and see if he wants to write the screenplay. And Arthur Coppett loved the idea. So HBO did allow Jeremy and me together to first write a story treatment using my idea of the reunion at the base as the core structure.
It was a great device.
And so Arthur used that, and Arthur wrote wonderfully. Now, they kept him writing draft after draft after draft, which has just put me in anguish. So we finally get up to draft number 5, which I said, this is it. This is the movie. This is the one I wanted to make. And one of the executives above us at HBO at that time says, no, we're not there yet. This isn't what we want. He pitches more to Coppett. Coppett comes up with draft number 6. It's worse. Draft number 7, worse. Draft number 8, not even a movie I would want to make anymore, almost unrecognizable. And so at the meantime, HBO is sending its own investigator down to Roswell.
Oh, good.
To snoop around and see if he thought the story was real. Well, it turned out it wasn't so good. The fellow that they sent was very Washington military connected. And he produced a document for them, casting a lot of doubt on the whole thing. And we had just been told, okay, you can start casting this thing. Send it out to major actors. Let's see who we can get. And a week later, we're called into Bob Cooper's office and we're told, we got really bad news for you. We've decided we're only going to make one flying saucer movie this year. And we have decided on Daryl Hannah in the remake of The Attack of the 50-Foot Woman.
Oh, Christ.
We are kicking Roswell out the door. That was the lowest day in my life.
Ah.
I went home and I lost my mind. I picked up my telephone and I threw it through my office window at home, and the neighbors heard the kids screaming and they wondered if I was abusing the children, and they sent the police to the house. That was that day of my life. And my wife had to explain to the police what was going on. So I thought we were dead. I mean, HBO said, we're putting you in turnaround. That is the term that means you can take your script, you could take Arthur's script and sell it to another company. They'll have to pay us back for what we paid him to develop it, or at least, something on each dollar.
Sure.
But you have the right to set it up somewhere else. And I just figured this is never going to happen. So from that point on, the next, say, 2 months was the most depressed time of my entire life, because I felt it was my mission. We had to.
Yeah.
So what happened was Eileen Kahn, her contract at HBO allowed her to take projects that had been put into turnaround and take them elsewhere. And she really believed in the project, and she really believed in Jeremy Kagan as director. So she took it to Showtime, and she showed it to one of her top connections there. And I get a call, great news, Paul, Barbara, I think it was Barbara Title, she loves it. She thinks they should make it. So all she has to do now is convince the boss above her and the boss above him and the boss above that guy. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't get excited. I thought, this is not going to happen. And then a couple of weeks later, I get a phone call saying, well, the guy above her likes it. He wants to do it. Now we got to get through one more. And I still felt, the universe has not been this good to me.
Right.
And then comes a phone call. Showtime wants to make your movie. They think that HBO's budget for it was too low at $4.5 million.
Fabulous.
They want to get the budget up to $6 million. But in order to have their full production vision, they are going to be asking you and Jeremy to be making some sacrifices in the contracts you had with HBO. So you won't get quite as much money, even though it's going to be a bigger budget. Of course, we said yes. And Don Schmidt and Kevin Randall were thrilled, because now Showtime outright buys the rights to their book.
Great.
First time they'd ever sold anything like that. And then we're told, okay, now in order to get this into production, we have to find a star that makes it a tentpole picture for us.
That you did.
So this was the next problem. You want to hear about that? Because I know you want to go into paranormal things too, but I'll just tell you the story about, Kyle MacLachlan. Kyle MacLachlan liked it. He's young. So in order to play it, he was going to have to be made up in old age makeup to be, there he is in old age makeup, to be Jesse Marcel in his mid-70s.
Yes.
And we had originally been thinking we're probably going to get an actor who's older, maybe in his high 60s or something, and he'll have to go low in age. But the Kyle MacLachlan idea was the reverse of that. You were going to do. So what happened is, Kyle MacLachlan's manager said to Kyle, they were offering him a lot of money for a television movie at that time. They were offering him, I think enough time has passed, I can say, it was $400,000 to play Jesse Marcel. And his manager says, Kyle, over my dead body, will you accept this? You don't want to be playing this part. He said, you've had a starring role in the Flintstones. You're a young leading man, handsome. You want people to think of you as a 70-year-old, decrepit old Army major? You'll kill your career. And Showtime got tired of waiting for an answer, and they said, look, we got to know. You got till 5 o'clock close of business on Wednesday to tell us, yes, you take the deal or it's off the table. And we didn't have another actor. At 5 minutes to 5, they get the call saying, okay, he's going to do it. I mean, talk about nail biting between 4 and 5 p.m. What they put us through. But once they decided to do it, it was really the most wonderful cinema movie experience of my life.
I'm going to go through a bunch of photos from the film.
Yeah.
First, very powerful poster. And again, you ended up with Martin Sheen.
Yeah, that was luck. That was great. Martin Sheen, we got him to play a guy who could be a real UFO informant.
Yeah, a composite character, so to say.
Or he might be a disinformation agent. You don't know.
That's right.
So he was perfectly cast, and we got Dwight Yoakam to play the rancher whose field that crash came down
and
on.
He did a great job for a guy who wasn't a trained actor. He captured the heart of the character and made him very real.
Now, I want to say very quickly now, because I don't want to forget saying it later. Your audience is going to have a hard time finding the movie now. They can find a DVD of it. There is a DVD out there. It was out of circulation for 15 years, maybe 12 years. No DVD. And then they put out a DVD, a limited edition. They said, you want to order this, you can't order more than 2 copies. Okay. I would have ordered 15 copies immediately.
That's nuts.
And they never put it online for streaming. They kept it off. Now we're talking Paramount, Viacom, CBS owning this film. CBS has always been an enemy of UFO disclosure. You know, going back to the days of Walter Cronkite, they put out a lot of debunking disinformation documentaries through the years. Paramount, I don't know why they would be withholding it. Has it just been overlooked and forgotten because it's an old movie, but it's so relevant today?
It is. It's also one of the very few films dealing with the subject of genuine, truly anomalous, advanced machine UFOs and the implications for humanity that focuses in on what a genuine whistleblower witness can be put through or go through in their lives. This really destroyed the quality of life of this very decent American and certainly courageous member of the Army Air Corps.
And you see it happening to the whistleblowers before Congress today, what they try to do them.
Yeah, but you dealt with it in this film in a way that was so important and so well done, rather than a more standard kind of UFO film scenario with special effects and aliens and all that. It humanized it and really gave it a very unique place in the world of UFO-related films.
We did have a great script from Arthur Koppett, by the way, and when Showtime said we're going to make it, they said, Paul, you're the expert. Which of his scripts would you use? I said number 5. You know, that was the one that did it for me. By the way, I'm going to turn this around. If you can see in my office, that is the alien that is alive in Roswell. He's here in my home office on display. He was an audio animatronic character.
Yes.
But if your listeners want to find it, you have to go to a pirated edition until somebody at Paramount listens to your show tonight and says, what? Let's get it out there.
Yeah, we can make some money on this.
Yeah. You should Google Roswell, the UFO cover-up movie. Use the word movie. Maybe how to see, and you will find a link to a pirated version, which is a perfectly fine rendition of it from beginning to end with no ads.
Yeah, some wonderful location shots, and again, we see where some of the budget went. You can't make believe you've got a B-29. You need a real one, or a B-16. Again,
we had $50,000 in the budget to fly that out from Texas.
Love it.
For one day to the Van Nuys Army Airfield and film with it there.
Again, a very, I'm sure, accurate rendition of, soldiers on their knees going through the area and trying their best to strip it of all of the bits and pieces of the crashed craft, which they weren't completely successful about.
A very interesting anecdote is that the sergeant, let's see, what was his rank? The one who was the head of all the MPs, I don't know if you remember, and I'm forgetting his name right now, but I do remember a story from Kevin Randall. Very important. Kevin Randall called him for an interview years later, of course. And he said, I'm not going to talk about it, Kevin. He said, I promised the president I wasn't going to talk about this, and I'm not going to talk about it. Well, he's talking about President Truman in 1947. Truman actually got the people that were involved, to swear that they were going to not talk about it. And Kevin was very sneaky. He said, okay, I understand you're not going to talk about it. He said, let me just ask you this question. He said, my co-author, Don Schmidt, and I, we've kind of been going at this with the theory that this incident really actually could have been extraterrestrial. But we don't want to waste a lot of time, going off on something that's completely the wrong track. Can you at least tell me if we're really on the wrong track? And the head of the MPs said, no, I'm not going to say you're necessarily on the wrong track. How's that for not talking and giving an answer?
Fabulous.
We've got about, looks like we got about less than 10 minutes. And
we're moving through these very quickly. The famous restaging of this photograph. This is the hangar. And not a set. Your wonderful creature.
This was one of the several alien props we had. This wasn't the one that was alive, but this one I arranged to have donated to the Roswell UFO Museum, and it's been on display since.
And it's appreciated by so many people. And you had a small part in this, and it's wonderful to see.
I played the Army photographer in the autopsy.
Damn.
And in the movie, one of the aliens, the one who's in my office now, is alive.
Yeah.
And my one speaking line in the movie is, I say, "Hey, this just moved."
And you and the actors, and now again we're going to jump cut, because my evening with you in the Magic Castle was pretty magic for me. Again, this is a private club in an historic building that is filled with magicians and theaters to perform in, a wonderful restaurant, one of the greatest collection of magician ephemera I've ever seen or imagined in my life. And you and all of your colleagues were incredibly welcoming. I was like a kid. I mean, we saw several showings, and I really reacted kind of like a 7-year-old for some of them. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing.
It's one of the most amazing clubs in the world. I joined, I think, in 85 or 86. I've been a member ever since.
Yeah.
When we lived in Los Angeles, before we moved to Sedona, I went almost every week that we were in town. They changed the shows every week. They have 3 large showrooms. Well, they're not all large. They have a large one called the Palace of Mystery, and then they have the Parlor of Prestidigitation, and then they have a close-up gallery. And the magicians under contract are changed every week, and it's there that I learned my magic performances, and I can hold a crowd for a good hour. I'm telling you.
Yes, you can.
Close, right at the tip of my fingers.
If you ever meet Paul and he has a deck of cards, you're you're simply not going anywhere for a considerable period of time.
I have a story you're really going to like. And that is, a friend in Santa Fe had us over as a guest. He is a UFO skeptic. I brought my $2,000 night vision goggles with me that night at his house. Early in the evening, I performed magic for him and his other guests. And he was dazzled. He said, "Paul, you're world class. I can't figure out any of it." Later, a couple hours later, I went outside with my wife and another one of his guests with the night vision goggles, and we saw a fleet of UFOs over Santa Fe that you could not see with the naked eye. It started out, maybe 4 or 5 of them. They were zipping across the sky. They called them fast walkers. There were UFOs doing loop-to-loop like that. There were 2 that went whoop, like that, just going toward each other and putting on a show while we watch. I had him come out. One of the guests brought out the skeptic owner of the house who had seen the magic show earlier. And he looked through it. And after he saw it, he looks at me with a shitty grin and he says, "These aren't real goggles, right? This is part of your magic show."
Oh, gosh.
And of course it was real.
Yes.
And he wouldn't believe it.
How
He
interesting.
wouldn't believe it up to the moment that he went back to his house. We saw about 15 of them at most.
Gosh.
And I had never seen that before in Santa Fe or Sedona, anything like that, but it was real.
Again, we have so little time and so much about the rest of your creative life.
Peter, I want people to visit my art. If you,
yes, and let's once again give them that URL, because you can stay there for hours.
Yeah, Paul Davids. That's David with an S, and then a hyphen, and then the word art.com. And it has hundreds of my paintings. And now people can get my paintings on coffee mugs or throw pillows or greeting cards or prints, and even phone cases. So I think most people find the art really beautiful and alluring, and we've had a lot of orders for the merchandise. People like to own this stuff, sets of coffee mugs and things like that. Also tote bags, carry bags with the art on it. But you have to see it to understand why. And it's all a lot of categories. So I have I Love Paris. I have New York, Sedona. We're just adding Mexico now. And we've got the living ocean. We've got, untrampled nature. So there's all these different categories that the paintings are broken up into.
There's so much that we haven't gotten to, but just to show, we're into our last few minutes, but you did a project after Forrest J. Ackerman died, the Life After Death project. And that theme has run through a certain amount of your work. You've also explored things that absolutely have fascinated me as somebody who, as a young man, pack on the back, spent months walking around India. This was a particularly interesting documentary here. And then completely shifting gears.
Another of my films that I made with my wife, Marilyn Monroe Declassified.
Yeah, and she didn't commit suicide.
Deep investigation into the circumstances, the true circumstances of her death.
It still upsets me, but it wasn't suicide. The Artist and the Shaman, a brilliant film also. And your dad.
My dad.
I wanted to, when I visited you, you showed me, well, a number of obituaries, but obituaries major in major publications, I never knew anybody who had a relative who was treated like that. Here it is from the New York Times, among others. You have lived and are continuing to live a remarkably creative life, and you have a new book and a new film on their way out. Can you just give us brief on that in 30 seconds?
Okay, the book is called Growing Up Sci-Fi in Garrett Park. You can find it on Amazon. It's filled with photos, and it tells you a lot of the story that I told you here, of what it was like to be a kid making 8mm movies, and step by step how it led into me having a career making films in Hollywood. And then I've just finished a movie you won't be able to find yet. I'm entering it into a lot of film festivals. It's called Reflections of an Artist with Clarinet. I play the clarinet. I'm not at all bad at improvisation, and I created all the music for this movie with my clarinet improvisations, and I'm introducing you to my art with the musical backgrounds and explaining the why behind the art. Why am I painting so many paintings of Paris? Why am
Paul Davids, we are out of time completely, my friend. I look forward to being back together next year in Sedona. Thank you so much for being on the show tonight. Peter Robbins here, my special guest, Paul Davids. Meanwhile, here on Earth, see you next week.